Before we dive into tonight's story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And stick around until the end to rate this story from 0 to 10. Now let's begin. The marble floors of the Grandview Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceiling. Soft jazz drifted through the lobby, mixing with the clink of champagne flutes and the low murmur of conversations too expensive to be loud. Waiters in crisp white jackets glided between clusters of guests, balancing silver trays laden with caviar and imported chocolates. Madison Cole stood just inside the revolving door, gripping the strap of her worn leather messenger bag like a lifeline. Her simple black dress, borrowed from her roommate and slightly too tight around the shoulders, felt painfully out of place among the designer gowns and tailored suits surrounding her. She glanced down at her phone for the third time in as many minutes. The message from her supervisor was clear. Company mixer at the Grandview. 6th floor ballroom. Business casual. Be there by 8. Networking opportunity. Madison had nearly laughed when she read business casual. To these people, that probably meant a $1,000 blazer. To her, it meant the one dress she owned that didn't have coffee stains. Taking a breath that tasted like nerves and expensive perfume, she headed toward the elevators. A man in a navy suit stepped in beside her, his cologne so strong it made her eyes water. She pressed the button for the 6th floor and tried not to fidget. This was her second week as an intern at Hartwell Financial Group. 2 weeks of making copies, fetching coffee, and trying desperately not to screw up in front of people who earned more in a month than her mother made in a year. The mixer was supposed to be her chance to make connections, to prove she belonged in this world of marble lobbies and champagne receptions. But standing here, feeling the weight of every curious glance, she wondered if she'd made a mistake even coming. The elevator doors opened. Madison stepped into a corridor lined with gold-framed mirrors and soft amber lighting. Ahead, double doors stood open, revealing the ballroom beyond. Music swelled. Laughter echoed. She could see silhouettes moving inside, elegant and confident. Just as she reached for the door, a deep voice stopped her cold. "Excuse me." Madison turned. A man stood 3 feet away, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes. Those eyes were dark, sharp, assessing her with the kind of intensity that made her skin prickle. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been sewn directly onto his body, his jaw carved and clean-shaven, his dark hair pushed back in a style that screamed money and control. For a second, Madison forgot how to speak. Then he stepped closer, and the spell broke. "You're here for the evening arrangement." It wasn't a question. His voice was smooth, authoritative, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. Madison blinked. "Arrangement?" "Yes." He pulled a slim wallet from his inside pocket, extracting a black credit card without breaking eye contact. "I assume the rate is standard." Madison's brain stumbled over itself, trying to process what he'd just said. "Rate?" The man's expression didn't change. "If you prefer to negotiate, we can discuss terms upstairs. I have a suite on the 14th floor." The realization hit her like ice water. "Oh my God, he thinks I'm a— No, no, no!" Madison shook her head so fast her vision blurred. "I'm not. I mean, you've got this completely wrong." His eyebrow arched, skepticism carved into every line of his face. "You're not here for an appointment?" "I'm here for the company mixer." Madison gestured wildly toward the ballroom. "I'm an intern at Hartwell Financial. I'm not." She couldn't even say the word. A long, excruciating silence followed. The man's jaw tightened. His gaze swept over her again, slower this time, and Madison felt her cheeks burn. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped. "My apologies. I mistook the situation. Mistook? Madison's embarrassment flared into anger. You thought I was a sex worker because, what? Because I don't look expensive enough to be here? His eyes narrowed. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant. Her voice cracked, louder than she intended. The man stepped back, his expression unreadable. If I offended you, it wasn't intentional. If, Madison wanted to scream. Instead, she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Congratulations. You've made my night absolutely unforgettable. She turned on her heel and shoved through the ballroom doors before he could respond. Inside, the noise and light swallowed her whole. Her hands were shaking. Her face was on fire. She headed straight for the bar and ordered the first drink she could think of, a gin and tonic. Make it a double. The bartender, a young guy with kind eyes, slid the glass across to her without judgment. Rough start to the evening? You have no idea. Madison downed half the drink in one gulp, the alcohol burning a path down her throat. She set the glass down harder than necessary and closed her eyes. Deep breaths, Cole. Don't let some arrogant jackass ruin this for you. But God, the look in his eyes. Like she was a commodity. Like she could be bought with a credit card and a hotel suite. She wanted to cry. She wanted to punch something. Instead, she drained the rest of her drink and ordered another. By the time she turned away from the bar, the ballroom had started to blur at the edges. The music felt louder, the voices sharper. She spotted a group of interns huddled near the windows and made her way over, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Hey, one of them greeted her. Madison, right? You just started this week? Yeah. Madison accepted a champagne flute someone handed her, even though she'd already had 2 gin and tonics on an empty stomach. How's it going so far? Honestly, tonight might be a disaster. The group laughed, thinking she was joking. Madison laughed too, but the sound felt hollow. Across the room, she caught a glimpse of charcoal gray. Her stomach dropped. The man from the hallway stood near the entrance, speaking to a silver-haired executive she recognized from company emails. He looked calm, composed, like their encounter had never happened. Madison's grip tightened on her glass. Of course, men like that never had to think twice about their mistakes. An hour passed. Madison networked, smiled, made small talk about market trends she barely understood. She avoided looking toward the entrance. She avoided thinking about sharp, dark eyes and that horrifying word, rate. But then, just as she was beginning to relax, someone tapped a fork against a glass. The ballroom quieted. A woman in a red dress stepped onto a small stage at the far end of the room. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Claire Donovan, senior partner here at Hartwell. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This mixer is about building connections, fostering talent, and celebrating the incredible team we've built. Madison clapped politely, her mind already drifting. But then Claire continued, and I'd like to introduce a very special guest. He's not only a major investor in our firm, but also one of the youngest self-made CEOs in the city. Please welcome Dominic Ashford. The room erupted in applause. Madison's hands froze mid-clap. No. Claire gestured toward the entrance. Dominic stepped forward. Charcoal suit, dark eyes. The same man who had offered her money in the hallway. Madison's breath caught. Oh God. Oh no. Dominic took the microphone with easy confidence, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. Thank you, Claire. I'm glad to be here. Hartwell Financial has always impressed me with its commitment to innovation and integrity. I'm looking forward to working more closely with this team in the months ahead. The crowd applauded again. Madison wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never resurface. Dominic's gaze swept the room, and for one heart-stopping second, It landed on her. Recognition flickered. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. Madison looked away, heat crawling up her neck. This can't be happening. After his speech, Dominic stepped down, immediately surrounded by executives eager to shake his hand. Madison edged toward the exit, keeping her head down. If she could just slip out unnoticed. You're the intern, aren't you? Madison froze. She turned slowly. Dominic stood right behind her, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Madison Cole. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. And you're Dominic Ashford. I know. His tone was flat. About earlier, I don't want to talk about it. Madison cut him off. Can we just pretend it never happened? Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Agreed. Madison exhaled, relief flooding through her. Good. She started to walk away, but his voice stopped her again. Although, if we're pretending it never happened, that means we're starting fresh. Madison glanced back. Suspicious. So? So. Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping just low enough that only she could hear. Let me buy you a real drink, not as an apology, just as two people who got off on the wrong foot. Madison stared at him. Was he serious? I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because you're a major investor, and I'm an intern who makes minimum wage. Because an hour ago you thought I was. She bit off the word. A sex worker. Dominic said it without flinching. Yes, I was wrong. I'm not usually wrong. But tonight I was. And I'd like the chance to prove I'm not a complete asshole. Madison wanted to say no. She should say no. But something in his eyes, something raw and almost vulnerable, made her hesitate. One drink, she heard herself say. That's it. Dominic's mouth curved into the faintest smile. One drink. And somehow, despite every logical bone in her body screaming at her to walk away, Madison followed him out of the ballroom. They didn't go far. Just down the hall to a smaller lounge area with leather couches and low tables. A bartender stood behind a polished counter, polishing glasses in the dim light. Dominic ordered a whiskey. Neat. Madison asked for water. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. They sat across from each other, the silence stretching thin. Madison broke it first. So, CEO. That's impressive. Dominic shrugged. It's work, a lot of it. That's a very humble answer for someone who just got applause from a room full of financial analysts. His lips twitched. I don't do humility well. Madison couldn't help it. She laughed. Yeah, I got that impression. Dominic leaned back, studying her with that same unnerving intensity. You're different than I expected. Different how? More honest. Most people in that room would have smiled and pretended the hallway never happened. They would have played the game. I'm not good at games. Madison met his gaze directly. I say what I mean, even if it gets me in trouble. Dominic's eyes glinted. I respect that. Madison took a sip of water, her pulse still unsteady. Why did you think I was, you know? He didn't look away. You were standing outside a private event, dressed simply, alone. I've been to enough hotels to recognize the signs. The signs, Madison repeated, her voice tight. You mean you've done this before? Hired someone. Dominic's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. You made it my business when you offered me money. Fair point. He took a slow drink. But no, I haven't. Tonight was a first. And clearly, I'm terrible at it. Madison wanted to stay angry, but something about the way he said it, dry, almost self-deprecating, made her anger falter. Why tonight? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. Honestly, I've been working 18-hour days for the past 3 months. I'm tired. I'm lonely. And when I saw you standing there, I thought, Maybe for once, I could have something uncomplicated. Something that didn't require negotiation or strategy. Just contact. Madison's chest tightened. That's really sad, actually. Dominic's laugh was hollow. Yeah, it is. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Less hostile. More human. Madison set down her glass. For what it's worth, I get it. The lonely part. Not the millionaire CEO part, obviously. But the rest. Dominic tilted his head. You don't strike me as someone who'd be lonely. Madison smiled faintly. I moved here 6 months ago. I left my family, my friends, everything I knew, to chase this dream of working in finance. And most days, I feel like I'm drowning, like I don't belong, like everyone can see right through me. That's why tonight, she stopped, her throat tightening. When you looked at me like I was, less than. It hurt more than it should have. Dominic's expression softened. I'm sorry. Truly. Madison blinked, surprised. That's the first time you've said it like you mean it. I do mean it. His voice was quiet. You didn't deserve that. Madison felt something shift in her chest, something she didn't want to name. She cleared her throat. So, one drink. We've had it. Guess that means, Dominic interrupted. Can I ask you something? Madison hesitated. Sure. Why did you agree to this? To sit here with me after what I said? Madison looked down at her hands. I don't know. Maybe because you're the first person tonight who didn't talk to me like I was invisible. Even if you did insult me in the process. Dominic's mouth curved. That's a low bar. Yeah, well. Madison met his eyes. Welcome to my life. They talked for another hour. About work, about the city, about nothing and everything. Dominic told her about the pressure of running a company at 32. Madison told him about growing up in a town so small it didn't have a traffic light. He made her laugh. She made him think. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Madison forgot to be angry. When she finally glanced at her phone, it was past midnight. Oh God. I have to be at the office at 7. Dominic stood. I'll walk you out. They rode the elevator down in comfortable silence. Outside, the city glowed under streetlights and neon signs. A taxi idled by the curb. Madison turned to him. Thanks for the drink. And the apology. Dominic nodded. Thanks for giving me a chance to make it. Madison started toward the taxi, then paused. Hey, Ashford. He looked back. Try not to insult any more interns. I'll do my best. She smiled and climbed into the cab. As it pulled away, she glanced through the rear window. Dominic stood on the curb, hands in his pockets, watching her go. And for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart was racing. The next morning, Madison woke to the blare of her alarm and the pounding reminder that she'd had 3 drinks and 4 hours of sleep. She groaned, buried her face in the pillow, and seriously considered calling in sick. But interns didn't get sick days. Interns showed up, smiled, and pretended everything was fine, even if they'd spent the previous night having drinks with a millionaire who'd mistaken them for a call girl. God. Madison sat up, rubbing her eyes. Had that really happened? Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Jenna. How was the mixer? Meet anyone interesting? Madison stared at the message. Interesting was one word for it. She typed back. You have no idea. I'll tell you tonight. By the time she arrived at the office, her head was clearer, but her nerves were shot. The Hartwell building loomed above her, all glass and steel, a monument to money and ambition. Madison swiped her intern badge and stepped into the lobby, joining the stream of employees heading for the elevators. Inside, she kept her head down, reviewing her mental checklist. Coffee for the team. Organize files. Sit through the morning briefing without falling asleep. Don't think about Dominic Ashford. Especially, don't think about the way he looked at you when he apologized. The elevator doors opened on the 10th floor. Madison stepped out and nearly collided with her supervisor, Angela Reeves, a sharp woman in her 40s, with perfectly styled hair and an expression that said she didn't suffer fools. Madison. "You're late. I'm 3 minutes early." Angela glanced at her watch. Early is on time. On time is late. "Now come on. We have a meeting." Madison followed her down the hall, stomach sinking. What kind of meeting? Client briefing. Angela pushed open a conference room door. "You'll be taking notes." Madison's pulse spiked. "I've never. You'll be fine. Just write down everything that's said." Angela gestured her inside. The conference room was huge. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs. And, sitting at the far end, flipping through a folder with the same unreadable expression he'd worn last night, was Dominic Ashford. Madison froze. "No." Angela didn't notice. "Mr. Ashford, thank you for coming in. We're excited to discuss the portfolio expansion." Dominic looked up. His gaze landed on Madison. For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Amusement? Maybe both. Then his expression smoothed into professional neutrality. "Of course." He stood, extending a hand to Angela. "Always a pleasure, Ms. Reeves." Angela gestured toward Madison. "This is one of our new interns, Madison Cole. She'll be assisting with documentation today." Dominic's gaze slid back to Madison. His mouth curved. Just barely. "Ms. Cole, a pleasure to meet you." Madison forced herself to shake his hand. The contact was brief, but she felt the warmth of his palm, the strength in his grip. Likewise, her voice came out steadier than she felt. They sat. Angela launched into a presentation about investment strategies and market forecasts. Madison opened her laptop and tried to focus on typing notes, but her thoughts kept skittering sideways. "He's here, in my office. Why didn't he say anything? Does Angela know we met? Of course not. How would she?" Halfway through the meeting, Dominic interrupted. "Ms. Reeves, I'd like Ms. Cole's perspective on something." Madison's fingers froze over the keyboard. "What?" Dominic leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You're studying finance, correct?" Madison nodded slowly. "Yes." "Then tell me, if you were managing a high-risk portfolio in a volatile market, would you prioritize short-term gains or long-term stability?" The room went silent. Every eye turned to Madison. Her mind raced. This was a test. She didn't know if it was professional or personal, but either way, she couldn't afford to fail. "I'd prioritize stability." She kept her voice even. "Short-term gains are tempting, but in a volatile market, they're unpredictable. Long-term stability builds trust with clients, and trust is worth more than a quick profit." Dominic's expression didn't change, even if it means lower returns in the short run. "Yes, because clients who trust you stay with you. Clients chasing quick money leave the second someone offers them a better deal." A pause. Then Dominic nodded. "Smart answer." Madison exhaled, her pulse hammering. Angela looked pleased. "Well said, Madison." The meeting continued, but Madison barely heard the rest. Her entire focus was on not looking at Dominic, on not letting anyone see the way her hands trembled as she typed. When it finally ended, Angela stood. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford. We'll send over the revised proposals by end of week." Dominic rose, collecting his folder. "I look forward to it." He moved toward the door, then paused beside Madison's chair. "Ms. Cole." She looked up, heart in her throat. "Yes, good work today. Keep it up." Then he was gone. Madison stared at the empty doorway, her thoughts spinning. Angela clapped her on the shoulder. Impressive. He doesn't usually acknowledge interns. You must have made an impression. Madison forced a smile. Just doing my job. But inside, she was screaming. The rest of the week passed in a blur of spreadsheets, coffee runs, and sleepless nights. Madison threw herself into work, determined to prove she belonged. But no matter how hard she focused, her thoughts kept drifting back to Dominic, to the way he'd looked at her across the conference table, to the faint smile he'd given her when no one else was watching. It's nothing, she told herself. He's a client. You're an intern. This is a disaster waiting to happen. But Friday afternoon, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Drinks tonight. Same place. DA. Madison stared at the screen. How did he get her number? More importantly, why was he texting her? She should ignore it. Delete it. Pretend she never saw it. Instead, she typed back. Why? 3 dots appeared. Then, because I'd like to see you again. Madison's heart did something stupid and reckless, she replied. 8 o'clock. When she arrived at the hotel lounge that night, Dominic was already there. He wore dark jeans and a fitted black shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Less CEO, more human. Madison slid into the seat across from him. This is a bad idea. Probably. He pushed a glass of wine toward her. But you came anyway. She took the glass. I'm starting to think I have terrible judgment. Dominic's mouth curved. Or maybe you're just curious. Madison took a sip. Fine. I'm curious. About what? About why a guy like you would want to spend time with someone like me? Dominic leaned back, his gaze steady. You really don't see it, do you? See what? That you're smart, driven, honest to a fault. You don't play games. You don't pretend to be something you're not. Do you know how rare that is? Madison felt heat creep up her neck. You barely know me. I know enough. Dominic's voice dropped. I know you walked into that ballroom terrified and came out standing taller. I know you called me out when I was an asshole. I know you answered my question in that meeting like you'd been doing this for years, not weeks. Madison looked away, her chest tight. Stop. Why? Because she met his eyes. Because you're making this complicated. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does. Madison set down her glass. You're an investor in my company. I'm an intern. If anyone finds out we're... What? Friends? Dominic's gaze didn't waver. Friends. Sure. Let's call it that. Madison wanted to argue, but the way he was looking at her, steady and warm and just a little bit dangerous, made the words stick in her throat. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Dominic told her about the first company he'd started, how it failed within a year, how he'd lost everything and had to rebuild from scratch. Madison told him about her father, who died when she was 16, who'd always believed she could do anything. You would have liked him, she said softly. He sounds like a good man. He was. Her voice cracked. He would have hated seeing me struggle like this. Dominic reached across the table. His hand covered hers, warm and solid. You're not struggling. You're surviving. And that's harder. Madison blinked back tears. When did you get so wise? When I stopped pretending I had all the answers. They left the lounge near midnight. Outside, the air was cool, the city quieter now. Dominic walked her to the curb. I'll get you a cab. Madison shook her head. I can walk. It's late. I'll be fine. Dominic frowned. Madison, he stopped. Just let me do this. Something in his voice made her relent. Fine. He flagged down a taxi. As Madison reached for the door, Dominic caught her wrist. She looked up. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. Madison's breath hitched. I haven't decided if I'm giving up yet." Dominic smiled. Fair enough. She climbed into the cab. As it pulled away, she glanced back. He stood under a streetlight, hands in his pockets, watching her go. And this time, Madison let herself admit it. She was falling, and she had no idea how to stop. The following Monday, Madison arrived at work to find her desk buried under a stack of files. Angela appeared beside her, coffee in hand, looking far too awake for 7 in the morning. "Good news, Madison. You've been assigned to the Ashford account." Madison's stomach dropped. "What?" Angela smiled. "Mr. Ashford requested you specifically. Said he was impressed with your work last week. This is a huge opportunity. Don't screw it up." She walked away before Madison could respond. Madison sank into her chair, staring at the files. Dominic had requested her. Why? Was this professional? Or personal? Or some dangerous mix of both? Her phone buzzed. A text from him. "Congratulations on the assignment." "You earned it," Madison typed back quickly. "Did I? Or did you pull strings?" His reply came immediately. Both. She wanted to be angry, but instead, she found herself smiling. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Madison worked closely with Dominic's team, analyzing portfolios, drafting reports, sitting in on strategy meetings. She saw him almost every day, sometimes in conference rooms, surrounded by executives, sometimes in quiet corners of the office, where they'd steal 5 minutes to talk about nothing important. The line between professional and personal blurred more with every conversation. One evening, after a particularly brutal meeting, Dominic found her in the break room. "You look exhausted." Madison poured herself another coffee. "I'm fine. You're running on fumes. Go home." "I can't. I have 3 reports due tomorrow." Dominic took the coffee cup from her hands. "They can wait." Madison looked up, too tired to argue. "Why do you care?" "Because," his voice softened. "I know what it's like to burn out. And I don't want to watch you do it." Something in her chest cracked open. "I don't know how to slow down. Then let me help." "How?" "By reminding you that you're human, that you're allowed to rest." Madison's eyes stung. She looked away. "I'm scared if I stop, I'll lose everything." "You won't." Dominic stepped closer. "I won't let you." The air between them felt electric. Madison's pulse hammered. She should step back, should leave, but she didn't. "Dominic, don't." He shook his head. "Don't tell me this is a bad idea. Don't tell me we should stay professional. I know all of that. And I don't care." Madison's breath caught. "You should." "Maybe." His hand lifted, fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I don't." And before she could think, before she could stop herself, Madison kissed him. It was reckless, stupid, everything she'd told herself not to do. But God, it felt right. Dominic's arms came around her, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, desperate and raw. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Madison pressed her forehead to his. "This is insane. I know. We could both lose everything. I know." Dominic pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "But I don't want to walk away." Madison's heart raced. Neither do I. They stood there, tangled together in the empty break room, the city glowing beyond the windows. And for the first time in weeks, Madison let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Keeping their relationship secret turned out to be harder than either of them expected. At work, they maintained careful distance, professional smiles, polite emails, nothing that would raise suspicion. But after hours, they carved out stolen moments, late dinners in quiet restaurants across town, walks through the city when the streets were empty, nights in Dominic's penthouse where they could finally drop the act. Madison learned things about him she never would have guessed, that he hated mornings, that he played piano when he couldn't sleep, that beneath the cold exterior was someone who felt everything too deeply and had learned to bury it. Dominic learned her, too. The way she chewed her lip when she was thinking, how she took her coffee, black with too much sugar, the scar on her wrist from falling off her bike when she was 10. One night, lying in his bed, Madison traced patterns on his chest. "Can I ask you something?" Dominic's hand moved lazily through her hair. "Always. Why did you really request me for your account? Was it just to see me more?" He was quiet for a moment. "Partly. But also because you're good at this. Better than you think." Madison propped herself up on one elbow. "You're biased." "Maybe. But I'm also right." She smiled. "You're impossible." "You like it." She did. More than she wanted to admit. But 3 months in, cracks started to show. Madison was exhausted. Between her regular intern duties and the Ashford account, she was working 14-hour days. Dominic wasn't much better. His company was in the middle of a major acquisition, and the stress was taking its toll. They started arguing. Small things at first. Madison snapping at him for canceling plans. Dominic withdrawing when she pushed too hard. One night, it exploded. Madison had waited 2 hours at a restaurant. Dominic never showed. She went to his penthouse, furious. "You couldn't even text me?" Dominic looked up from his laptop, eyes bloodshot. "I got caught in a meeting. I forgot." "You forgot." Madison's voice shook. "Do you have any idea how that feels?" "I'm sorry." "That's it? You're sorry?" Dominic closed the laptop, his jaw tight. "What do you want me to say, Madison? That I'm perfect? That I'll never screw up? I can't promise that. I don't want perfect. I want you to care enough to remember I exist. I do care. Then act like it." Dominic stood, his voice rising. "I'm doing the best I can. You think this is easy for me? Juggling a company, a secret relationship, you?" Madison flinched. "Juggling me? Like I'm another obligation. That's not what I meant." But that's what it sounded like. She grabbed her bag. Maybe this was a mistake. "Madison, don't." She walked out, slamming the door behind her. For 3 days, they didn't speak. Madison threw herself into work, ignoring the ache in her chest. Dominic buried himself in meetings, his expression colder than ever. On the 4th day, he showed up at her apartment. Madison opened the door, her heart lurching. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to grovel." She crossed her arms. "I'm listening." Dominic took a breath. "You're not an obligation. You're the only thing in my life that makes sense. I screwed up. I forgot dinner because I was drowning, and instead of asking for help, I shut you out." "I'm sorry." Madison's throat tightened. "I can't keep doing this. Feeling like I'm always second to your work. Then don't be second." Dominic stepped closer. "Let me prove you're first. How?" "Move in with me." Madison's eyes widened. "What?" "Move in. We're already spending every night together anyway. This way, we don't have to hide. We don't have to steal moments. We can just be." Madison's mind raced. This is crazy. Maybe. "But I don't want to lose you," her heart hammered. "What about work? We'll figure it out." Dominic's voice was steady. "I don't have all the answers, but I know I want you." Madison looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, and she realized she wanted this too. "Okay? Okay?" Madison laughed, shaky. "Okay, let's do this." Dominic pulled her into his arms, kissing her like he'd been holding his breath for days, and maybe he had. Maybe they both had. That night, they packed up her tiny apartment. Dominic hired movers. Madison protested. "It's too much. Let me do this." He caught her hand. "Please." So she did. And 2 weeks later, Madison Cole, the intern from a town with no traffic light, was living in a penthouse with a millionaire CEO. It felt surreal, but it also felt right. Living together changed things. Not in the ways Madison expected, but in small, unexpected moments. Like the morning she woke to find Dominic making breakfast, his hair still messy from sleep. Or the evenings when they'd sit on the couch, her feet in his lap, talking about everything and nothing. But it also brought new challenges. At work, they had to be even more careful. No lingering glances, no private conversations. Angela had started watching Madison more closely, her sharp eyes missing nothing. One afternoon, she cornered Madison in the hallway. "You're doing well on the Ashford account." "Thank you." Angela's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Ashford speaks highly of you." "That's good to hear." "Just remember, Madison, this industry doesn't forgive favoritism. Make sure everything you do is earned." Madison's stomach twisted. Understood. But as Angela walked away, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that somehow she knew. That night, she told Dominic, "Do you think she suspects?" "It's possible." Dominic poured them both wine. "Does it matter?" Madison stared at him. "Of course it matters. If people think I'm only succeeding because I'm sleeping with you, everything I've worked for is meaningless." Dominic set down his glass. "You're succeeding because you're brilliant. Anyone who thinks otherwise is an idiot. That's easy for you to say. You're the CIO. You don't have to prove yourself." He flinched. "You think I don't have to prove myself? Every day people question my decisions, my age, my methods. I've spent my entire life fighting to be taken seriously." Madison softened. "I know. I'm sorry. She sighed. "I don't want to be seen as the woman who slept her way to the top." "Then we'll make sure that's not the narrative." "How?" "By being better than everyone else, by working twice as hard, by making it impossible for anyone to deny you've earned your place." Madison met his eyes. "You really believe I can do that?" "I know you can." Something in his certainty steadied her. Okay. But 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. Madison was in a meeting when Angela pulled her aside. "We need to talk. My office. Now." Madison's pulse spiked. She followed Angela down the hall, dread pooling in her stomach. Inside the office, Angela closed the door. "Sit." Madison sat. Angela leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "How long have you been sleeping with Dominic Ashford?" The world tilted. "What?" "Don't lie to me. I've seen the way you look at each other, the way he requests you for every meeting, the way you leave at the same time every night." Madison's mouth went dry. Angela held up a hand. "I don't care about your personal life. But when it interferes with this company, it becomes my problem." "It's not interfering, isn't it?" Angela's voice hardened. "You've been given opportunities other interns haven't. Meetings, accounts, access. And now people are talking. They're saying you're sleeping your way into a promotion." Madison's chest tightened. "That's not true. Maybe not. But perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that you're compromised." "So what are you saying?" Angela's expression softened, just slightly. "I'm saying you need to make a choice. Either you step back from the Ashford account and prove you can succeed on your own, or you leave." Madison felt like she'd been punched. "You're firing me?" "I'm giving you an option." Angela straightened. "But if you stay, you do it on your terms, not his." Madison walked out of the office in a daze. She went straight to Dominic's building, bypassing security, taking the elevator to the top floor. His assistant tried to stop her. "Miss Cole, Mr. Ashford is in a meeting. I don't care." Madison pushed past her, shoving open the conference room door. Dominic looked up, surprise flashing across his face. Madison, what? We need to talk. Now. He stood, addressing the room. Excuse me. In his office, Madison paced. Angela knows. Dominic closed the door. About us? Yes. And she gave me an ultimatum. Step back from your account or leave. Dominic's jaw tightened. She can't do that. She can. And she's right. People are talking, Dominic. They think I'm using you to get ahead. You're not. But it doesn't matter. Madison's voice cracked, because that's what they believe, and as long as we're together, that's all they'll ever see. Dominic stepped toward her. So what are you saying? Madison's eyes filled with tears. I'm saying I can't do this anymore. No. His voice was sharp. Don't do this. I have to. If I stay, I'll never know if I'm good enough. I'll always wonder if I earned it or if you gave it to me. And I can't live like that. Madison, I'm sorry. She backed toward the door. I love you, but I have to choose myself. And she walked out, leaving Dominic standing alone in his office, the weight of her absence crushing. The next 3 months were the hardest of Madison's life. She moved out of the penthouse, back into a cramped apartment she could barely afford. She threw herself into work, taking on projects no one else wanted, staying late, coming in early. She avoided Dominic, changed her route through the office, declined meetings where she knew he'd be. Angela watched her closely, but Madison didn't falter. She delivered results, built relationships, earned respect. Slowly, the whispers faded. But God, it hurt. Every morning, she woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Every night, she replayed their last conversation, wondering if she'd made the right choice. Dominic didn't reach out, didn't call, didn't text. And Madison told herself that was for the best, even if it felt like dying. Then one Friday, 6 months after their breakup, Madison was called into Angela's office. She went, bracing for bad news. Instead, Angela smiled. Congratulations. You've been offered a full-time position. Analyst, starting next month. Madison blinked. What? You've earned it. Angela's voice was genuine. You worked hard, proved yourself. I'm proud of you. Madison's eyes stung. Thank you. There's one more thing. Angela handed her a folder. We're hosting a gala next week. Big donors, clients, executives. You're invited. And before you ask, yes, Dominic Ashford will be there. Madison's heart clenched. You don't have to come. Angela's gaze softened. But I think you should. That night, Madison stared at the invitation. Part of her wanted to throw it away, to avoid the inevitable pain of seeing him again. But another part, the part that still ached for him, whispered, Go. So she did. The gala was held at the same hotel where they'd met. The irony wasn't lost on Madison. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her makeup minimal. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just trying to survive. Inside, the ballroom glowed with chandeliers and champagne. Madison took a glass from a passing waiter and found a quiet corner. And then she saw him. Dominic stood near the windows, talking to a group of executives. He looked the same. Tall, composed, untouchable. But there was something different in his eyes. Something dimmer. Their gazes met across the room. For a moment, everything else faded. Then someone stepped between them, and the moment broke. Madison exhaled, her hands trembling. She set down her glass and headed for the exit. But before she could leave, a voice stopped her. Running away already. She turned. Dominic stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Madison swallowed. I wasn't running, just needed air. He nodded. Mind if I join you? She should say no. But instead, she found herself nodding. They walked out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, the distant hum of traffic filling the silence. "You look good," Dominic said quietly. "Thanks. You too." Another silence. Then Madison spoke. "I heard you closed the acquisition. Congratulations." Dominic shrugged. "It's just business." "Is it ever just business with you?" He looked at her. "Not when it comes to you." Madison's chest tightened. "Dominic, I'm sorry." His voice was raw. "For what happened? For pushing you away? For not fighting harder?" "You didn't push me away. I left, because I made you feel like you had to choose, and you shouldn't have had to." Madison's eyes burned. "I don't regret it. I needed to prove to myself that I could do this on my own." "And did you?" She nodded. "Yeah, I did." Dominic smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good." "That's good." "But God, Madison, I miss you." Her breath hitched. "I miss you too. Then why are we standing here pretending we don't want this?" Madison looked out at the city. "Because I don't know if we can make it work. Because I'm terrified of losing myself again." Dominic stepped closer. "What if I promised you wouldn't? What if we did this differently? No secrets, no hiding, just us." Madison met his eyes. "And if people talk? Let them." His voice was steady. "I don't care what they think. I only care about you." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Dominic, I love you." He pulled her into his arms, and Madison broke. 6 months of holding it together shattered, and she clung to him, sobbing into his chest. Dominic held her, his hand cradling the back of her head. "I've got you." When she finally pulled back, her face was a mess. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He wiped her tears with his thumb. "You're allowed to feel." Madison laughed, shaky. "When did you get so wise?" "When I lost you." They stood there, foreheads pressed together, the city glowing around them. And this time, Madison let herself believe. Maybe they could make it work. Maybe this time, they'd both be strong enough. Starting over wasn't easy, but this time, they did it right. Dominic sat down with Angela, explaining their relationship openly. He made it clear that Madison's success was her own, that he wouldn't interfere with her career. Angela was skeptical, but she agreed to give them a chance. Madison worked twice as hard to prove herself. She took on challenging projects, delivered results, built her reputation brick by brick. And Dominic supported her, not by pulling strings, but by being there, listening, believing. 6 months later, Madison was promoted to senior analyst. A year after that, she led her first major deal. People stopped whispering, started respecting. And slowly, Madison stopped doubting herself. Their relationship settled into something real. Not perfect, but honest. They argued, made up, learned each other's rhythms. Dominic taught her to play piano. Madison taught him to stop working past midnight. They traveled to cities where no one knew them, where they could just be two people in love. And on a quiet Sunday morning, 2 years after they met, Dominic woke Madison with coffee and a question. "Marry me." Madison blinked, still half asleep. "What?" Dominic knelt beside the bed, holding a small velvet box. "Marry me." Madison sat up, her heart racing. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I don't have a big speech. I just know I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Tears filled her eyes. "You're insane. Is that a yes?" Madison laughed, pulling him onto the bed. "Yes." "You idiot." "Yes." They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, close friends, no press. Just them, making promises they intended to keep. And as Madison stood beside Dominic, his hand in hers, she thought back to that night at the hotel, to the mistaken identity, the awkward apology, the beginning of everything. She leaned close, whispering, "You know, if you'd been a little less arrogant that first night, none of this would have happened." Dominic smiled. "Then I'm glad I was an asshole." Madison laughed. "Me too." They kissed, and the room erupted in applause. But Madison barely heard it, because for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with someone who saw her, challenged her, loved her, not despite her flaws, but because of them. And that, she thought, was worth every painful step it took to get here. Married life brought new challenges. Merging their worlds completely meant navigating family, public appearances, and the relentless scrutiny of the press. Madison's mother visited for the first time, her eyes wide as she stepped into the penthouse. "This is where you live now?" Madison laughed nervously. "Yeah. Feels weird, right?" Her mother hugged her tight. "As long as you're happy, baby." "I am, Mom." Madison realized she meant it. Dominic's world opened up to her in ways she'd never imagined. Charity galas, board meetings, conversations with people who shaped industries. At first, it was overwhelming. But Madison learned to hold her own, to speak with confidence, to trust her instincts. One evening, at a fundraiser, a journalist approached her. "Ms. Cole, or should I say, Mrs. Ashford, how does it feel to go from intern to wife of one of the city's most powerful CEOs?" Madison smiled, but her voice was firm. "I didn't go from intern to wife. I went from intern to senior analyst to wife. My career stands on its own." The journalist blinked. "And your husband's influence?" Madison's gaze didn't waver. "My husband believes in me, but everything I've achieved, I've earned." The clip went viral. People praised her response. Others criticized. But Madison didn't care. She'd learned to tune out the noise. At home, things were simpler. Dominic still worked too much. Madison still pushed herself too hard. But they'd learned to balance it. To carve out time for each other. Friday nights were theirs. No work, no phones. Just dinner, music, and each other. One night, as they danced in the living room, Madison rested her head on his chest. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I used to think you were so untouchable, like you didn't need anyone." Dominic's arms tightened around her. "I didn't think I did." "Until you," Madison smiled. "We've come a long way from that hotel hallway." Dominic chuckled. "Best mistake I ever made." Madison looked up. "Mistaking me for a call girl?" "No." He met her eyes. "Asking you to pretend, because somewhere along the way, it stopped being pretend." Madison's throat tightened. "For me, too." They swayed in silence, the city glowing beyond the windows. And in that moment, Madison realized something. She'd spent so long trying to prove herself, to earn her place in this world. But the truth was, she'd always belonged, not because of Dominic, not because of her job, but because she'd fought for it, clawed her way up, refused to let anyone define her worth. And that was something no one could ever take away. A year later, Madison found out she was pregnant. She told Dominic on a Saturday morning, hands shaking as she handed him the test. He stared at it, his face unreadable. Then he looked up, eyes shining. "We're having a baby?" Madison nodded, tears spilling over. "Yeah, we are." Dominic pulled her into his arms, and for a long moment, they just held each other. Terrified, thrilled, ready. Their daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in October. Tiny, perfect, with Dominic's dark hair and Madison's stubborn chin. They named her Grace, for the second chance they'd been given. The grace they'd learned to offer each other. And as Madison held her daughter for the first time, Dominic beside her, she thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago. Scared, uncertain, standing outside a ballroom, hoping to prove she belonged. That girl would never have believed this was possible. But it was. And it was beautiful. 5 years passed. Grace grew into a bright, curious child who asked a million questions and had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Madison became a partner at Hartwell Financial, leading deals that made headlines. Dominic's company expanded globally, but he made sure to be home for dinner every night. Life wasn't perfect. They still argued, still struggled with balance, but they'd learned to weather the storms together. One evening, Madison found Dominic in his study, staring at an old photo. She recognized it. The two of them at that first gala, pretending to be together. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic looked up, smiling. "How far we've come." Madison sat beside him. "Any regrets?" He shook his head. "Not one. Me neither." She took his hand. "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts." Dominic squeezed her fingers. "They made us who we are." Madison leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you. I love you too." And in the quiet of that moment, Madison felt a peace she'd spent years searching for. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. Messy, complicated, beautiful, real. And that was more than enough. Grace started kindergarten. Madison gave a keynote speech at a finance conference. Dominic launched a foundation focused on education for underprivileged kids. They bought a house outside the city. Somewhere with a yard and trees and space for Grace to run. Madison planted a garden. Dominic built a treehouse. And on weekends, they'd sit on the porch, watching their daughter play, marveling at the life they'd built. One night, after Grace was asleep, Madison and Dominic sat outside under the stars. "Remember that first night?" Madison asked. "At the hotel?" Dominic smiled. "Hard to forget." Madison laughed. "You were such an ass." "Still am sometimes." She elbowed him. "True. But you're my ass." Dominic pulled her close. "And you're my everything." Madison's eyes misted. "When did you get so sentimental?" "When I realized how lucky I am." They sat in comfortable silence, the night wrapping around them. And Madison thought about the journey, the mistakes, the heartbreak, the healing. All of it had led here, to this moment, to this life. And she wouldn't change a single thing. Years continued to unfold. Grace grew older, developed her own dreams. Madison wrote a book about navigating careers and relationships. Dominic stepped back from the day-to-day, mentoring young entrepreneurs. They traveled more, laughed more, held each other through losses and celebrated victories. And on their 10th anniversary, Dominic took Madison back to the Grandview Hotel, to the same lounge where they'd had their first real conversation. "You remember what you said to me that night?" Dominic asked. Madison smiled. "I said a lot of things. You said you weren't good at games, that you always said what you meant." Madison's throat tightened. "I remember. That's when I knew." Dominic's gaze was soft. "That you were different. That you were someone worth fighting for." Madison reached across the table, taking his hand. "Best decision I ever made." "What?" "Fighting for you." Dominic kissed her knuckles. "Best decision I ever made was letting you." They ordered drinks, talked, laughed. And when they finally left, walking hand in hand through the lobby where it all began, Madison felt the full weight of their story. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Every painful moment, every doubt, every tear, because it led to this, to them. And that was the greatest gift she'd ever received. On a crisp autumn evening, 20 years after that fateful night, Madison and Dominic sat in their living room. Grace, now a young woman pursuing her own career in journalism, was visiting for the weekend. She curled up on the couch beside her mother. "Mom, tell me again how you and Dad met." Madison glanced at Dominic, who smiled. "It's a long story." "I've got time." So Madison began, with a hotel, a mistaken identity, an arrogant CEO, and a stubborn intern who refused to back down. Grace listened, eyes wide, laughing at the funny parts, gasping at the dramatic ones. And when Madison finished, Grace shook her head. "That's insane." "I know," Madison smiled. "But it's ours." Grace looked between her parents. "You really thought Mom was a call girl?" Dominic rubbed the back of his neck. "Not my finest moment." Grace laughed. "But you made it work. Eventually." Madison squeezed Dominic's hand. "Very eventually." Grace stood, stretching. "I'm going to bed. But for the record, you guys are kind of the best." After she left, Madison and Dominic sat in the quiet. "You know," Madison said softly, "if I could go back and do it all over, I wouldn't change a thing." Dominic pulled her close. "Not even the parts where I was an ass, especially those parts." She kissed him. They made the happy ending better. And as they sat there, wrapped in each other, Madison realized something. Life wasn't about perfect beginnings. It was about choosing each other. Every day. Through the mistakes and the triumphs. Through the doubts and the certainty. That was love. And it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever known. The seasons changed. Grace graduated, started her own investigative journalism career, making her mother proud. Madison retired from active deal-making, focusing on mentoring young women in finance. Dominic sold his company, dedicating his time to philanthropy and spending long afternoons with Madison. They grew older together, silver threads in Madison's hair, lines around Dominic's eyes. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the two people who'd met in a hotel hallway, stubborn, flawed, perfect for each other. One evening, sitting on their porch, Madison asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" Dominic considered. "I think we would have found each other anyway." "You think so?" "I know so." He squeezed her hand. "Some things are inevitable." Madison smiled. "That's very romantic of you. I have my moments." They watched the sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Madison thought about the girl she'd been, scared and hopeful, standing outside a ballroom, trying to find her place. That girl had found more than a career, more than success. She'd found home, in a person, in a life they'd built together, one choice at a time. And as the stars began to appear, Madison whispered, "I'd do it all again. Every mistake, every heartbreak, just to end up here, with you." Dominic kissed her temple. "Me too." And in that perfect, quiet moment, Madison knew. This was the ending she'd always hoped for. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. Built on mistakes and second chances. On love that refused to quit. On two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way and chose each other every single day. That was the real story, not the beginning, but everything that came after. The messy, beautiful, imperfect journey. And Madison Cole, once a terrified intern, now a woman who'd lived a full and extraordinary life, smiled. Because she knew. She'd found exactly what she'd been searching for, and it had been worth every step. Years later, when Madison was asked to speak at a conference for young professionals, she stood before a room full of eager faces and told them the truth. Success isn't about never making mistakes. It's about what you do after. It's about showing up, doing the work, refusing to let anyone else define your worth. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I started as an intern who was mistaken for someone I wasn't. I could have let that moment define me. Instead, I let it fuel me." The room was silent, hanging on every word. I fell in love with the person I was investigating. I had to choose between my heart and my career. I chose both, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But here's what I learned. You don't have to choose between being successful and being human, between ambition and love, between proving yourself and letting someone in. You can be all of it. Messy, complicated, beautifully imperfect. Applause filled the room. Madison smiled, her heart full. After the speech, a young woman approached her. "That story about your husband, is it true? All of it?" Madison nodded. Every word. The woman's eyes shone. "That gives me hope." "Good." Madison squeezed her shoulder. "Because hope is where it starts." She left the conference and drove home, where Dominic was waiting. "How'd it go?" he asked as she walked in. Madison kissed him. Perfect. They made dinner together, laughed about Grace's latest article, planned a trip they'd been putting off for years. And as they settled onto the couch, Dominic's arm around her, Madison thought about the question that young woman had asked. Is it true? Yes. Every impossible, unlikely, beautiful part of it, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. The final chapter of their story was written not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments. Morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, hands held during evening walks, laughter that came easier with every passing year. Madison and Dominic grew old together. Their love deepened, softened, became something unshakable. And when people asked them the secret to a lasting relationship, they always gave the same answer. We chose each other. Every day. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Grace married, gave them grandchildren, and Madison watched her daughter navigate her own complicated love story, offering advice when asked, support always. One quiet Sunday, Madison sat in her garden, the sun warm on her face. Dominic emerged from the house, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. Still the gentleman, Madison teased. Always. He sat beside her, and they watched the flowers sway in the breeze. Madison? I love you. Madison turned, seeing the same intensity in his eyes that had captivated her 25 years ago. I love you too, more than she could ever put into words, more than any story could capture, because their love wasn't just the dramatic beginning, it was every day, after, every choice, every moment they'd built together, and that was the real magic, not the fairy tale, but the life, messy, real, absolutely perfect in its imperfection. And as they sat together in the garden they'd planted, Madison knew. This was the ending she'd always dreamed of. Not because it was easy, but because it was theirs. Written one day at a time. With love. With patience. With the unwavering belief that they were exactly where they belonged. Together. And that would always be enough. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories, and check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.